you come home and you're with your kids. And so you sort of feel like that tug and pull of, I miss that person. And then you go, wait a minute, but there's a whole nother group of women that are out there that are also moms. So I'll just make that my happy hour. I'll make those my fun moms. I'll connect with them. And so that part of you keeps going, that fun part of you. And I think that's me. That's maybe one of the reasons why the whole mommy wine culture started, right?
You're listening to episode 78 on the Air Hug Community Podcast. Hey, welcome back to the Air Hug Community, a place where you can come to listen to stories and conversations by guests and myself, and I am just like the average midlife mom next door. Stories and conversations that we have about literally how to live a life that we love. We talk about all sorts of topics relevant to midlife, from cleanliness and self-love and fitness and, of course, healthy habits, family, relationships, and all sorts of things that creep into our lives at this stage of our life. So I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us here, and let's get to it. Welcome back, everybody, to the Air Hug Community Podcast. I am very, very excited for our guest today, who is going to very generously share her story out loud. So our guest today is Heather Danby, and Heather and I met right at the beginning of COVID. I don't think we met before COVID. It was the very beginning of COVID, and it was in a Facebook group of sorts. And we just started talking, and every now and then we meet up for a conversation, and we did most recently. And I learned something very special about Heather, and I want her to share it today. And so here she is, ready to share it out loud. Welcome, Heather.
Hi, Judy. Thanks so much for having me. This is the first time I've ever done something like this, not shared and talked about my story and kind of the background of what makes me me, but I haven't been on a podcast. So thank you so much for asking me. I'm excited.
I'm thrilled to have you here, and I know our audience is going to be as well. So
I hope so. Well, I guess I should say my name is Heather, and I am an alcoholic. And you and I had a conversation the other day on the phone, and I guess I just casually sort of told you that I was, and I know that you were surprised. So we got into this conversation of just a little bit about my story and how I had actually been thinking about doing a podcast, focusing mostly on alcoholism, but some other women's issues, depression, anxiety, and some other things, and keeping it light and fun too. And then you encouraged me. You think that I should do that, so
I totally think you should do that. People listen, and at the end, you're gonna want her to keep talking.
Yeah. Oh. So yeah, I think so I got sober. Well, first of all, I'm 51, and I got sober almost 3 years ago. It'll be March 21. So I celebrated my year anniversary of being sober right after lockdown started, which is crazy.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I won't talk too much about AA because AA sort of discourages that, because when you talk about AA, if someone tries AA and then they don't get sober, then they blame it on AA and whatnot. And but I do have to recognize that Alcoholics Anonymous is what got me sober. It completely saved my life. So I celebrated my year anniversary during not just the pandemic, but during lockdown. And I celebrated it on Zoom, because all of our meetings that we used to have in person went to Zoom, which ended up actually being kind of cool, because AA is 7 days a week, basically 24 hours a day, all over the world. So you can jump onto a meeting when you need to, anytime, which is really, really neat.
So wait a minute. So before pre-COVID, meetings were local, right? You met face to face.
Yep. In
and
person.
Now
There's
all
like
of a sudden.
Yeah. And then everything had to go online. So thankfully for Zoom, and I think there are a lot of professionals out there in the AA world who knew how to use Zoom. I mean, I used to use it for work all the time in my corporate environment. So it was easy. All you had to do is create an account and get on and go. So although I didn't tell you this the other day, this was so bizarre. I don't know if this happened to you, but we actually had some issues where we had some Zoom bombers so people, because the Zooms weren't necessarily private, because I think at that time, a lot of people didn't have codes. It was just, why would you? You really didn't need one, right?
Yeah.
So people got a hold of the Zoom number, and then they would come in and say bad things, and it was kind of bizarre. So a lot of people had to switch, and so you just had to make sure that everything was private. But yeah, AA completely saved my life. And I think the story why you're interested, and why I think that a lot of women, parents, specifically mothers, would be interested, is how does one, as a mother with children and a whole amazing life, become an alcoholic? And it's a really good question.
It is a really good question, right? Why does one mother become one and one doesn't? And what do you think are I think people encourage like happy hour and relax at night with a glass of wine. And so how did it go from casual to almost fatal, I will say?
Well, it could have been. I think I don't know that you have two kinds of alcoholics, but absolutely. So I have addiction in my family, and it's definitely something that's genetic. It is, in the alcoholic world, we do consider it a disease. So, just like someone has some sort of chronic condition and needs to be treated, alcoholism and other forms of addiction also need to be treated, right? Exactly. So I know that I was everything. My personality, this a little bit about me. I am super energetic. I'm the energizer in everybody. I like to go, 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 go. And I'm also a perfectionist.
And you like to help.
I like to help. I do love to serve. But I also want people to like me, right? So I think that looking back, probably from my first drink at, I don't know, I think I was in 7th grade. I could never just have one drink. So although for me, it was on and off through sort of junior high and high school, and then there was a traumatic event in high school that I stopped, and I didn't drink at all through college at all. And then it started later in my 20s. So
most people drink their way through college, and you did.
I do, and I didn't. I know, isn't that crazy? But I had a group of friends that just wasn't into that, and I don't know. I guess because of that, I wasn't hanging out with people who were drinking, so it wasn't normal for me to do that. So what happened though is then you get out of college, and I drank a little bit here and there, and then I met my husband, and I think what happens is, if you don't sort of get out that fun, rah going out, all that in college, you do it later, and that's what happened to me. I discovered dirty martinis. I discovered mixed drinks. I discovered all of these things, and I couldn't just have just one. So, but fast forward into motherhood, I had a very, very traumatic birth with my son, and I almost died. I hemorrhaged. Then my milk didn't come in. My son had colic. It was just, my husband actually called my parents from Michigan and said, you need to come get your daughter. She's depressed. She's not doing well. So when my son was 3 weeks old, I actually moved to Michigan with my parents for, I think I was there for seven weeks.
With the baby?
With the baby. Yeah. With the baby. But I was depressed. I mean, I had gained almost 50 pounds. I was miserable. I felt just gross, right? All these things were happening to me. My milk, like I said, didn't come in. He had colic. And I ended up having undiagnosed postpartum depression. And I've suffered from depression my entire life. My entire life. So that's definitely, and depression and anxiety go hand in hand with addiction, right? Because you're constantly chasing the need to sort of push
Food.
that anxiety, the depression, food. It could be anything. It could be shopping. If you have insecurities, that can lend itself towards addiction, because so if I'm anxious about something, I'll drink, right? And not just one drink just to settle in, like a lot of moms, and have just a glass of wine to wind down, right? For me, it could be a bottle a night. I mean, it would be starting with dinner and cooking and all of that, and then I would be passed out though by 7:30, 8 o'clock, and my husband would be putting the kids to bed.
Wow.
So I think I think having all those issues as a new mom, and then as he got older, he was a really, really hard kid. And believe me, I do not blame drinking. Something comes in. Oh, did I lose you for a minute?
Just for a second, but I think we're okay.
So sorry. So here is one really important piece of information, and I think the conversation will probably go from here, is I will never forget the first birthday party I walked in where there was alcohol for the parents. And it was like a 3-year-old's birthday party.
Oh, and so this was for the parents. And
So I think that I honestly don't remember my son's first couple of years in terms of drinking, but I do specifically remember when it triggered, and I thought, oh, all these other parents are drinking. I guess that makes it okay for me. It's not going to make me a bad parent if I have a glass of wine. If they're having it at a birthday
party, Susie's
a
good mother, then you must be a good mother.
And we're in the city and we're taking cabs, right? And we're not driving, then I guess that will be okay. Well, that was the start of a very sad and traumatic downhill escalation.
How old was your son at that point?
He was probably 3. Okay. Whoops. Oh my gosh. I think my watch is talking to me. Yeah. So, oh my gosh, let me just get rid of my watch for a second. I'll put it over here. Everything's technology based, right? Oh my gosh. Even my watch talks to me. Good grief.
We're too available.
I know, way too available all the time. So I think, because again, I had these addiction tendencies, it's in my DNA, all these problems with my son, me feeling just absolute garbage about myself.
I was depression. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was the perfect storm. So when I had my daughter, so I finally decided to have another child, and then I had a couple miscarriages. That's a whole nother thing. And then I finally had my daughter, and she was a lot easier. She was just a super easy baby. But I also saw other new moms at that point who had babies the same age. And they said, well, how are things going? Are you back to drinking wine again? Like, well, no, I can't do that. I'm going to have to pump and dump. I'm going to have to do all these things. Oh, no. It'll be fine. So I would say encouraged. Yeah, most definitely. And it's not certainly because we had social media then. Then I'm so old. We did have it then, but it is not like it is now in terms of the mommy cups and the mommy wine and the mommy drinking and the encouraging parents, specifically moms, targeting mothers with alcohol to escape their lives. And they don't say escape your life from your kids, obviously. I mean, the advertisers could never do that. But the amount of memes and advertising and the funny, quote unquote, funnies out there with moms and drinking, I'll tell you what, Judy, it is funny because when you're in it, you think it's hilarious. And you're thinking, oh, that's me. Oh my God, that's hilarious. The big wine glasses, right? Do you remember the show Cougar Town?
Yeah.
Where her character has that giant wine glass. You basically put like a bottle or two of wine in it or something. I thought that was funny too. But it's not funny because that is literally what is encouraging parents, specifically mothers, to drink. So,
and then if you have someone who's, I want to say, genetically predisposed.
Absolutely.
I don't know if it's genetic, personality, or situational, but for some reason, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can be an addict without having anyone else in your family. Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
And, for a while when I used to drink, I was super fun. But when it starts to change your personality, that's when you know it's a problem. And it did. I became an angry drunk.
Oh,
I was angry. And because I think what happens is, people say, well, have a drink, all your inhibitions will go away. And then that's why you see the shy person dancing on the table at the bar, or, able to socialize when you go into a setting because, she normally feels awkward, but now that she has a drink, she's able to do that. Well, it also does the opposite. And it can make you a really mean person. And all of these things that you might be feeling come out, right?
because you're not inhibited to hold them in, right? It's a
yeah,
disinhibitor. Yeah.
oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I am not let's get this straight. I am not a doctor. I am not a therapist. I am not an expert. I can only say from my story what alcohol does to me physically as a person, mentally, all of that. So let's just make sure that that's
Absolutely. Can I ask you a
that's out
question?
there. Yes, please ask questions.
So, did your husband recognize you as an alcoholic before you did? And did how did you, was it you who made the decision to get treatment, or how did that go?
So I will never forget the first time so I'm in our home office now, and we used to have a really small TV down here, and I will never forget, I was sitting on the couch and I had a bottle of wine next to me and I was watching TV. And this was before my daughter. And he came down and said, "What are you doing? Are you okay?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine." But yeah, so he started to see it, and he really started to see the personality change. That was big. So he knew something was up when I stopped being fun when I drank, and when the negativity and the anger and all that really started coming out. So, what's really sad is, so I tried to get sober for 3 full years before I actually got sober. And my husband, I can't remember if I told you this, but my husband has not had a drink. I think it'll be 6 years coming up, because he wanted to stop. He's not an alcoholic, but he and I would both drink wine at night, and it was the ritual, right? So he stopped to try and help me, and he stopped, because, obviously we couldn't have any liquor in the house. But when you are an alcoholic, and that was great, but I couldn't just stop. I needed it. It was a craving. It was my body needed it. So, and I didn't tell you any of this. It was bad, Judy. I mean, I hid it. So once we got all the alcohol out of the house, I can't tell you the number of places that I hid it. And I'll hear sometimes in meetings, I'll hear where people hid it. And I thought, never thought about that. That's really interesting. And I don't want to say it here because I don't want to give anyone an idea. No.
So were you successful at hiding it from your husband?
I was successful at hiding it, for hiding the actual bottles and containers places where he couldn't find them, but not successful in hiding it, because you could smell it and you could always tell. And when it wasn't just I would go to have one drink or something behind his back, it would be an entire, I mean, it got so bad. I was drinking like those squishy, although even some good quality ones were in those squishy containers, I think. I mean, and I would drink everything and anything. I mean, anything I could get my hands on. And it got to the point where I was just drinking to pass out. It was just such a horrible, horrible routine. I was drinking to pass out to go to sleep. I would awaken from the sugar boost at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I would go to my stash and I would guzzle to pass out again to make it till morning.
Oh my!
I don't know that I've ever told anyone that.
My heart is breaking for you.
Yeah. So it was a really, really bad cycle, and we went through a lot. I was terrible to my parents. I remember one Thanksgiving, I drank so much and kept sneaking it. I think I passed out by like 6:30 at night. Apparently I said some horrible things to my mother. My parents came, and don't think I'm not emotional about this. I've just been through this. I mean, I could sob. I believe me, but I've cried so many tears. And one of the things about my recovery is I cannot live in the past. You have to let go. Otherwise you will never be able to if you can't forgive yourself and move forward, you will never be well. You just won't. You cannot dwell on it. So I look at what I've done and I learn from it and I reflect and I feel sad and my heart hurts and my stomach hurts and I feel nauseous about those things, but it's getting to be a little bit less and less. But my parents each came separately for different weeks, trying to help me, trying to stay, trying to help me work through this. I went through 2 rounds of outpatient rehab. So I would go I think it was 4 nights a week, trying to work with therapists, taking different medications, different drugs, all of that. And nothing worked. An alcoholic is going to either drink until they die, or they are going to drink until something in them makes them wake up one morning and say, I just don't want to do this anymore.
So tell us, you must have been that later because you're here speaking to us.
Yeah.
So how did that happen?
So I would drink. So when I was in rehab, the first one was bad. That did not go well at all. And I started drinking again right away. The second one was better. I made it, I think it was the day before 6 months. And then I was starting a new job. I got nervous. How am I going to go to a job and go out to dinner and client functions and all of that and not drink? How am I going to explain sobriety? Right. And I just panicked and I had a drink, and then it was all downhill again. And then I would go 30 days and then I would drink, and then I would go 60 days and then I would drink, and then I would go a week. And it was just this cycle on and off for a really, really long time. And this is where I'm going to cry. This would be it.
It's okay.
Imagine the movie Groundhog Day, right? Where every day you wake up and it's the same cycle over and over. Every day I would wake up, and when you're wasted and you are waking up from a night of, craziness, you wake up and you go, and then all of the self-loathing and the regret just comes crashing down on you like a ton of bricks, right? So for me, it was every time that this happened that I would relapse, I would wake up, turn over to my husband and say, please don't hate me. And, I honestly don't know how he stayed. I don't know how you look at someone and think, I don't know how he ever had. I'm sure he didn't have any faith in me multiple times. But how do you do that? So, I mean, how do you parent 2 kids? I would parent my children, but for the most part, I would make dinner and I would, do X, Y, and Z, but then I would pass out. So he was always the one, but through all this, by the way, I was able to wake up every morning and work out and go to the gym, even if I had a hangover. I mean, I would still,
oh my God.
I think some people knew, but I was pretty good at hiding it, quote unquote, hiding it. I look back at pictures and I see how puffy my face was and just how awful I looked. So you would think, but a couple people that I've told just recently, so I'm almost 3 years, there are people who I'm just telling because I've just been very, very, very private about it. It is, addiction is a private, personal thing. And while I believe in sharing my story, and I just shared it on social media for the first time, like 2 months ago, maybe, because someone else had posted something in their life about depression and anxiety. And I thought, it's really not doing any good. If I can't share out loud things that I've been through to help even just one person out there in the world, then I'm not doing what I should be doing as a human being on this earth. So, so I was really, really private about it. And, because I would go to functions and I wouldn't drink. I wouldn't drink, but I would come home and drink. Or sometimes I would have it in my purse at a function and go to the bathroom into the stall and drink.
Seriously? Wow.
Yep. Oh, you name it, I've done it. All these and any alcoholics that will be listening to this, or any sort of addicts, I don't care if it's food or drugs or whatever it is, I'm sure that they will completely identify. So, so my husband, it was one day and everything was fine. And we were having some people over for dinner and I don't know what happened. I had some hidden upstairs. I decided to drink. He recognized it and we he said, why don't you go upstairs and go to sleep, and we'll just tell them that you're sick. And this
Oh,
wasn't just one time that this happened. This
mm-hmm.
was, more times that we've had to cancel things or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And the next morning I just woke up and, I should have said that I had been trying AA during this time.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who reached out to me. She saw my crazy, ridiculous, angry posts on social media.
Mm-hmm.
She and I worked together in the advertising industry, and she reached out to me and she introduced me to this incredible, just absolutely incredible women's group that I had to drive an hour in the suburbs to go to on Wednesday nights. And I did that for months and months and months, until that one morning I woke up and said, I'm done. And I called her and said, I need help. I can't do this alone.
Wow.
I need to work some sort of program. I like these meetings that I've been going to. I like AA. I need to do this.
So you were doing the Wednesday nights, but you were still drinking.
But I was still drinking, and I wasn't drinking. Yeah. And I had tried AA several times. In Chicago, it's like Starbucks. There's an AA on every corner. But you're embarrassed, or, you're like, oh, this is so awkward. I don't know. What is this? Is this a cult? This is really strange. And that's the universe probably saying you're not ready, right? Because if you're not actually listening to the people that are speaking, the words that are being spoken in a meeting, if stuff isn't resonating with you, then it just means simply that you're not ready.
So ready seems to be a big
ready. You have to, it doesn't take, I had hit a rock bottom that I don't need to talk about what that was. I had what I thought was my rock bottom, and it still didn't stop. So when they say somebody hit their rock bottom, it doesn't have to be a big traumatic event, because my big traumatic event wasn't my rock bottom. Oh. I still was sick. I still couldn't control my urges. I didn't want to stop. I wanted to stop, but I didn't want to stop.
So how did you get from being willing to and open to stopping?
Yeah, I literally, I don't know. And I think you'll hear this from most addicts, is you literally, either they do have that rock bottom and you have the light bulb that clicks and it goes on, or you just wake up one day and you just go, this is a phrase that you hear all the time. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm tired of Groundhog Day. I'm tired of waking up and saying, I'm sorry 1,000 times. I'm tired of feeling like absolute garbage, physically, emotionally, mentally. I am just tired. My kids were getting older. My son absolutely had seen it. He knows that I go to meetings. He's 17. My daughter, however, I haven't actually had the big conversation with yet. She's 13, and I need to. I just say I'm going on a Zoom call. Okay. But the kids know it, but she knows we don't drink. She doesn't know why. Although, to be honest, I've been posting a lot on Instagram about it. Like you said, you saw that in my Instagram and my bio, it does say recovering alcoholic. So
does she have Instagram and follow you? Or?
She does. She's not on it ever, but she has friends that are on there, so they might have said something. So, but my son and I talk a lot about it. He actually, so my mom has early, they say dementia. I still think it's Alzheimer's, but we were having a conversation about it when the kids were really upset over Thanksgiving, because she repeats herself a lot, and emotionally they're just, it's hard, for everyone. And Nolan it's my son. He was sitting there. God, this is really hard to talk about too. He said, she reminds me of you when you were drinking, because I would repeat myself over and over again. So that was hard. So it's hard, because there are moments when I'm like, oh yes, it's almost 3 years, God willing, it's going to be awesome. And I'm so proud of myself. And then you hear something like that and you revert back. But he's fine. And he's, he doesn't, thank God he doesn't drink, because it's a 17-year-old, I guess the pandemic hit at the right time. And he's proud of me, and he talks about it. And he just says, I'm so proud of you, and you're so strong for doing this, and you're such a great mom. So, This is the kid who was so difficult and I had all these issues with, almost died in childbirth. And now, but we have a great relationship. So,
oh my God,
but
what a blessing.
I know. And I know one of the things that you and I talked about, so we started to touch on this whole like mommy drinking thing, right?
Yeah. I'd like to hear.
I would like to hear from you. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed like the memes and you're a mom, you're a little bit older than me, but that doesn't mean that you wouldn't notice these things, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I will tell you, definitely I've noticed that, but I'm going to go back to before social media. And I'm thinking about this in retrospect. I had 4 little kids. We lived in a circle, and the kids would all ride their bikes in the circle. Now, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. But I remember a mom coming out with vodka gimlets, and I'd never even had a vodka gimlet. And she's like, it's 2:00 on Friday. It's happy hour. And I'm like, what? And when you said that, I went back to that memory and I thought, we did think it was great.
Yeah.
But I'm the kind of person who has like, especially with a cocktail, I'll have like 1 or 2 a week or a glass of wine. But anyways, you don't need to know about me, but that's the first time I became aware of, oh, this is like a mom relaxing thing. Isn't that kind of cool? So I totally get it. It happened to me too. It's like, well, that's kind of cool. And I do remember birthday parties where the moms would have alcohol. Moms and dads.
Full bars now. Full bars at these birthday parties. And that's fine for the normies.
Right.
but at the same time, it's like, when did this happen? When did it become about the parents and we have to survive our child's birthday party with a bunch of booze again? But that's because I'm an alcoholic. That's because I have a problem. Anyone else, maybe they don't feel that way,
I don't know if that's,
I don't know.
I wonder what it was like. So I'm a child of the 60s and 70s, my parents didn't drink. So they would offer it. We had a cupboard and I think the same bottle stayed in there like my whole life.
Okay.
They would pour wine, and they were Italian. They didn't even drink wine, but if someone came over on Sunday for sauce, they might go buy a jug of wine because they thought they were supposed to serve it. So a little bit different, a little bit different upbringing. But my thing is, since social media came out, before social media, we had magazines, right? That's what I remember. Like I got all my parenting info from magazines in the early years. And actually, there was no social media for me. Maybe I got on late until I feel like my youngest was maybe in junior high school. I'm going to say probably even somewhere in there. I don't know, 7th, 8th, 9th,
I got on when my son was born, actually before he was born, because I was on a June 2004 Expecting Club on like a mommy site. And then I think it was after that though. So maybe it was like 2008, 2009. I think I started social. No, because he was 2004. I didn't start till like 2008. So I don't know how old your son was in 2008, but
I'm 10 years older than you. He's about 11 years older than your son.
Yeah.
So but after that, when, social media comes out and then you do start seeing these things, and people posting and, but I don't remember talking about it. I do remember that one happy hour incident was, I felt like it was isolated. It was so foreign to me. Not that my husband and I didn't have, a glass of wine with dinner when we went out. We just, but it's interesting how much more I do think it is talked about now. Now it's so acceptable. Like this is what moms do. And people come home from work and, it's the, what's that show? Remember Darren Stevens, Bewitched?
Oh my gosh, we're reading. Oh yes. Oh, Bewitched. Oh my gosh, totally. I was actually going to say Mad Men, and that's a whole nother thing. But
oh yeah, right. That too.
With the women and that, right? The smoking and the drinking while they're pregnant, and you're just, oh my God.
Yeah. But I remember Darren Stevens. Would walk in and be like, oh God, make it a double, make it a triple. when I was little, I didn't know what that meant, but looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, but very, very much like Mad Men. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So I think, it has so, okay, if we want to talk about moms and drinking and beyond that. So there's a whole group of women, that are very, very outspoken on social media. One is a woman named Emily, and she has something called the Highlight Reel. And then she actually wrote a book. And then there is a woman, Recovery is the New Black. She's awesome. And then I'm going to have to look up this other woman. She's an ex Playboy bunny. She's been sober for 8 years, and she's one of my favorite people. She has a little boy now. Oh, shoot. Can't remember her name. Oh, anyway, there are some amazing women out there. And with the pandemic, they really stepped it up. So the pandemic, there was at one point alcohol sales they had increased by over 600% because everybody was home. So, literally 600%. It's somewhere you'll see, if you go back to, that time, it was in the news. And the amount of relapses that happened, the number, I think, of moms that started drinking even more because you have to homeschool your child. What? And it's not that parents don't want to be with your children, but you think about that. That's really stressful. I was stressed, and I have teenagers who mostly can do it on their own, but math, thank God for my son's girlfriend who tutored virtually. Actually, she would come over and then she did it virtually, but I can't do any of that. And so think about if I had little kids, I would probably be drinking by 3 o'clock too. But I think it's more than that, right?
It was actually, I don't want to say it was promoted, but it became acceptable.
Yes. Again,
even regardless of the industry, I think it became, and I will tell you, we had family staying with us. Our daughter stayed with us and son, and that we did open more wine than usual.
Yeah. It's because you're home. You don't have any place to go. You don't need to worry. You don't need to worry about, maybe you don't need to get up and get dressed and go someplace the next day. If you're just wandering into your home office or your bedroom or wherever you're working, it doesn't really matter. You can have more cocktails. And what I heard over and over again, well, what else am I going to do with my time? So that's interesting too, right? I look back certainly and think I didn't do enough. I wish I had painted and done all these things. I was cooking and working out a ton and doing like healthy things, right? But I know a lot of people, right? Being, in the health and wellness industry, the number of people who gained weight, right? And then you have this, I think, too, with alcohol, it's, think about during a pandemic. So you're drinking, you're eating, you're not exercising as much for most people. And then all of a sudden you're 20 pounds, 30 pounds heavier. And then you're like, oh my God. But instead of being able to rise up to the occasion and say, I need to do something about it, you fall into a slump. And then you keep eating and you keep drinking and you go on. And then the self-loathing just continues, right?
Yes,
the same thing with alcoholism. Self-loathing, I'll just drink more. Self-loathing, I'll just drink more. And it just becomes this horrible pattern that you can't get out of, right? So, and I think people, if you do not have addictive personality, if you do not know that you're an addict, you just don't think about these things. You don't think about how incredibly harmful it can be to see all these funny, mommy wine. Or you and I talked about, I said, I know full well that there are moms at soccer games and baseball games at 9, 10 in the morning, and they've got some sort of liquor in their coffee cup, and I'm not saying that these people have problems. I'm saying some of them do. Likely do. But that's also, it's just become accepted. And it's like, what?
What?
Why? Why? And why are people turning to this? Why aren't we?
What are we missing? Why are we so unhappy?
Why are we so unhappy? Why are we so unhappy as parents? I think some of it is because gone are the days of the community where people actually lived by their other family members and you had help. I mean, being in the city, I don't have family. No, that's not true. I have family here. But I didn't have anybody to help with my kids. We didn't have babysitters. I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know who to look to. So we stayed home a lot. So we drank at home a lot, right? You stay in. I mean, that's kind of what we did too. So, but it's, the mommy wine culture, the mommy drinking culture, it's an epidemic in itself. That in itself is an epidemic. And thank God for
separate from other. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, thank goodness for these women who are trying to take control out on social media, because there are also, it doesn't bother me now, but what's funny is another thing that actually does bother me. It's weird. It doesn't bother me to smell liquor. It actually makes me sick to my stomach though. And it doesn't bother me to see alcohol ads. What bothers me is all this new non-alcoholic stuff. There's non-alcoholic vodka. There's non-alcoholic tequila. There's non-alcoholic gin. Why can't I just have my cranberry and soda without the vodka? Why can't I just have my margarita without the tequila? And that's fine for some people, but for me, it's a real trigger. And I do know for other women specifically, it's a real trigger as well, because you're just replacing it. It's like when you're in AA, you're actually, you are not encouraged, I will put it that way, to drink NA anything, especially like beer, right? Because it's the same taste. So you're not taking away the craving then, because you're still allowing yourself.
You're not getting past. Yeah.
So that to me is bizarre too. This whole non-alcoholic industry has just boomed. But at the end of the day, I guess it's better than picking up, actual liquor or other forms of alcohol.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Maybe I'm under the wrong impression, but I always thought like non-alcoholic beer had like a trace of alcohol in it. And that's a good question. For some people, I think it used to. I don't know if it does, but yes, it's kind of like coffee. People don't realize that decaf actually has a smidge of caffeine in it. Yeah, it used to be the same way. So I'm not entirely sure. And now they have IPAs. They have actual good tasting non-alcoholic beer out there. Okay.
So that supposedly, so I've heard, I never drank beer, never liked it, but supposedly it tastes good.
People can enjoy it. Interesting. Yeah, so that's interesting. Yeah. But for you feel like that's,
that would be a trigger. It's a trigger. It would be a trigger. I don't want something that tastes like vodka or tastes like tequila in my drink. I love tequila. Margaritas are one of my favorite things on the planet, but to me that would just be a huge trigger. A huge trigger. So I also, Judy, I want to mention too, because this is a big question, and I'm sure anybody who listens will wonder, why wasn't her family more important than drinking? That's a big one.
That is a big one.
And alcoholics and addicts, but more so alcoholics, I think, than anything else out there. Because if you tell a person that you are a smoker, that's not nearly frowned upon as an alcoholic, right?
Right, or a sugar addict. Yeah.
And sometimes smoking can actually be harder to stop. I know that's a difficult addiction, but it's a really good question. Obviously I love my kids and I love my husband. I love my parents. I love my extended family. I love my friends.
What a wonderful family you have that supported you so much. Yeah.
Again, it's a sucker punch to the gut. I can't believe how much pain and worry and suffering I put everyone through. It's terrible. And add on top of that, anybody that I was mean to, friends or people on social media, I mean, the amount of damage that I did it's not, it's hard to comprehend.
I can't imagine you like that, because I don't know you that way. I know you as bubbly and helpful and analytical but not mean. Yeah.
And I was mean. I was real mean.
Wow.
But at the end of the day, it's a disease and we're sick. Addicts are sick and we need help. And it's not without help, you can't control it. So it wasn't a conscious choice. I just couldn't stop. And no, my kids were not enough for me. It's terrible. It's a terrible, terrible thing to say. But my kids and
it's powerful. It sounds like the cravings and the triggers must be.
Yeah. It's terrible. And believe me, I used to be Miss McJudgy too, and see alcoholics on the street, bums as people call them, with their paper bag and whatever. And I am no different than any of those people. I just have a home to live in. I have a computer to talk to you on. I have, makeup that I can purchase to put on, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. I may look different, but I am no different than anybody else with this addiction. I can walk into a meeting in a really not great part of Chicago, let's just put it that way. And I will walk in and I have something in common with all those people. And it's that I'm an addict and I need to work on my addiction and my recovery. I need to work on my recovery every single day.
Wow.
And Judy, the other thing is, I'm addicted to exercise. Like, that's an addiction, right?
Of course it is.
I mean, I'm addicted to looking good. I'm addicted to how it makes me feel. I mean, but you know what? I don't have a problem.
We can go down another path with that. And maybe someday we will. That might be another episode because it's not all good.
No. Right. Right. Yeah. So it makes me sad, and it makes me, I heard about women, mothers, parents who relapsed and died during the pandemic, people who hadn't had a drink in 10 years, people who hadn't had a drink in 20 years.
And they drank themselves to death.
Or drugged themselves to death.
Oh my Lord.
And these were people who had been sober. They had been working a program. They had good jobs. It hit a lot of people hard. I just heard a story about someone else, my friend's neighbor, lawyer actually, and was doing very well for himself. And I think he was around 40 or something, and he just drank himself to death. I think that, and here we are as a society, as a country, and we still don't put mental health as a priority, right?
Yeah.
I mean, insurance, you're still paying out the wazoo for copays and all of that. I mean, and when you're so deep into, you can't just go to any therapist. Really, for me anyway, my feeling is that you really need to go to someone who specializes in addiction to work with you on that. It's just like, it's the same, and you need to find someone good, right? I mean, there's so many doctors out there, let's say for depression and anxiety. I was completely over medicated because the psychiatrist they see you for 5 seconds and they just give you whatever. There's no assessment. There's no analysis, right? I mean, I just met a woman at the yoga studio, a mom from my son's old school. I just found out she had a food problem. She has a food addiction, and now she is a therapist because she saw such a saw such a need in that area for specifically food addiction, right? Yeah. So we all need help. We all need someone to talk to, and with any problem in life, we don't need to do things alone, right?
Yeah.
There's help out there, and there's hope for everyone. And I guess my message would be, if you feel like you drink too much, or that you couldn't go a day or 2 days or a week without a drink, tell someone you trust.
Yeah.
And, or find an AA meeting, and they are scary as fuck. They are scary. You walk in and you're like, where am I? Oh my God. And everybody's so nice, and they're running up to you and introducing themselves because you're new and they want to embrace you, but it's scary when you walk in, and it's so hard to admit. Nobody wants to admit that they are an addict. It's awful.
So let me ask you this, because I know you to be a compassionate person and someone who's lived through this. If there's anyone listening and wants to message you on Instagram, can they ask you some questions? And I'll put 100%. Your Instagram in the show notes.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, there's help out there, and AA is not the only form of help. There are definitely There are lots of other groups now that are doing some wonderful, wonderful things. I know that there are treatments out there, treatment centers, and even online treatment centers. All of those centers, in terms of financials, I've seen there's help for that way too. Let's say if someone can't afford it, but it literally takes one person that you have to tell and say, I know I need help. I'm scared, but I need help.
And that was a woman that you knew that you reached out to.
Yeah, she actually reached out to me, and she was there with me and saw me keep relapsing until that one day I called her. And she's my friend. She's also my sponsor. That's something we have in AA. And yeah, I mean, it just takes one phone call. But you also just have to be ready. So yeah, I hope that this was helpful.
I hope it was too. And I really want to thank you for sharing so candidly, because, oh my goodness. And the fact that you did this you were kind of still really new at this during COVID, in a time where in history, in our life, we've never been through anything like this.
Yeah. I mean, crazy. Yeah, it's, my husband likes to say, and I can't even believe, I mean, yeah. Well, and I should say too, things were not easy. My husband was mad at me for a really long time. Like the first year, I kept thinking, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to get through this? He hates me. But it does get better.
And he stayed with you.
And so that's, and I think that's a really good message out there too, for anyone that might be experiencing any sort of addiction, is there is hope. And even if you don't have a support system and your family has given up on you, it doesn't mean that there's not hope. There is such a beautiful life. I do have to add this, Judy. My life is so much better. The depression was fueled by alcohol. And I remember a friend of mine saying, just try, if you could get sober and be sober for 30, 60 days, which I was, but I really wasn't working it. Your depression will go away. Just watch.
Oh my God.
And oh my gosh, completely different person. I mean, it's not that I don't have a short temper and I get angry, and I definitely have that personality, but
nobody's happy all the time.
No, right? I mean, right. I'd love to be, but yeah, no, life is hard and life is not easy, and alcohol and cigarettes and drugs, all that stuff is easy to turn to. We're all looking for an easy way out, an easy fix.
Yes.
Right?
And it's so available and it's so encouraged. Yeah.
And well, it's the same thing with working out, right? Everybody wants a quick fix. Nobody wants to work at it, right?
Right. Nobody wants to see the results over 6 months. They want to be fixed in 21 days.
Yeah.
And that's a big bone of contention I have. So I won't go there, but right.
Yeah. So, but it is interesting. And you look at, I hear this over and over again, from people in the meetings, but also from, let's say, famous people out there, how much better their lives are, and all the wonderful things once they stopped their addiction, all the wonderful things that happened to them. Right. I mean, it's like something in the universe just totally shifted. And because now your energy is so bright and amazing, and you're a positive person, and you're ready to help others and take on the world, it's like the universe recognizes that sort of lightness about you, and then good things start to happen. It's pretty crazy.
It's like you pulled a curtain back.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And I'm not saying it's not work. It's, every day. Not. Life is, it's a lot of work, but it's worth it, and it's doable. And
wow.
Yeah.
I so feel like the chance meeting that we had last week, kind of, we hadn't talked in a while, and I'm like, I know when I emailed you, I said, and I know some people don't like to hear this, but I do believe this was supposed to happen. We were supposed to have this conversation so that you could get on here and talk. And I feel like this is practice for you hosting your podcast that I know you're going to do. Because you have such a message, and I'm sure there's so many people who resonate with you.
Well, you know what? If you are someone who has experienced, nobody's life is perfect, right?
Right.
And that's where I think social media is such, or podcast or whatever, there's such positivity there in terms of people sharing and recognizing that they're not alone, right? And I think that that's why share out loud. Don't just share in your head, share with one other person, one to one, share out loud. Be proud of who you are. Be proud of what you accomplished. Be proud of what you've overcome. Be proud of, if it's the same thing as if you're great at something, you shout that from the rooftops, right? So why wouldn't you be proud and share, when you've overcome something? So huge obstacles, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
So I just think that's really important. Have a voice. We all have a voice. We can all use it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Out there might be listening. So
thank you for using your voice today, because your sharing out loud, I think has really, it's opened my eyes to be a little bit more sensitive and not laugh at those memes, to definitely realize that for a lot of people, that's not a joke, it's a trigger. So I really want to thank you for joining us today, and get ready for that podcast, because you have so much more to say. I'm quite sure of it. And
thank you.
Gosh,
thanks for asking me. I really appreciate it.
I'm in awe of your strength. I really am.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you.
All right.
I appreciate that.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Yep. Bye.
This podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat or judge or any of the above. It's just simply Heather sharing her story, and she really does have a story to tell. If you would like to get in touch with her, you can find her on Instagram. I will put her handle in the show notes, but I believe it's Heather M. Danby, and she may also be able to put you in touch with other Instagram accounts if you're interested in this topic. Again, we're not supposed to talk about AA being the greatest thing ever, but if you are looking to get in touch with that, you can go ahead and get in contact with Heather, and she can tell you what to do. Listen, I'm so grateful for her to share our story, to know that, we don't all have to try and be the perfect woman. And sometimes we struggle, and some women struggle more than others, and some people are more prone, right, to having addiction problems. And there's no judgment. I think in some ways we all have some kind of addiction, one or another, but that's a topic for another day. I want to thank you for listening, and remember to check back in every Tuesday for a new episode here on the Air Hug Community Podcast. And one more thing, I'm going to ask this because I always do. If this episode resonated with you and you felt it to be helpful, or you felt that it could help someone else, please share it with a screenshot on your social media. And don't forget to leave a review and subscribe on Apple and now on Spotify as well.